Strokes are quite common. They're a leading cause of a loss of mobility, you have trouble getting around, and a loss of your independence, such as winding up in an assisted living home. Yet many strokes are preventable by making simple adjustments to your lifestyle and changing some of the foods you eat. So welcome to our Many Strokes Are Preventable episode. Hi, my name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a licensed pharmacist who also has studied nutrition. I'm over here at Invite Health. I'm also the scientific director, and I'd like to talk to you today about ways you can really help reduce your risk of suffering with a stroke. These are quite dangerous. And, what is a stroke? What are the symptoms to look out for? Are there medications that can trigger a stroke? What lowers your risk? What are the important things to lower your risk? Are there foods that can help? Are there supplements that can help? This and more we're going to answer over the course of this episode. So please be sure to subscribe to our Invite Health podcast. Please leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And all of the info on today's episode will be linked in the episode description. And you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more information. So let's get going. So strokes are a leading cause of a long-term disability. It takes a long time to get over them. You need a lot of physical therapy, etc. A loss of mobility, sometimes permanently. Loss of independence. Hate to say it, but death. Yet many strokes could be avoided. A stroke occurs when the blood supply to the brain is reduced or interrupted. So when that happens, your brain doesn't receive enough oxygen, it's not receiving the nutrients it needs to function, and brain cells start to die. Now, a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, that's really a warning sign that you can have a major stroke in the future. The symptoms pass quickly. Frequently, by the time you get to the emergency room, the symptoms may be gone. It's referred to as a mini stroke. The most common stroke by far is due to a blockage that's called an ischemic stroke. So it could be a blood clot. That's called a thrombus or a thromboembolism. Could be just an embolism, which could even be a piece of plaque that broke off from the lining of your arteries and went into your brain and blocked a major blood vessel in the brain. Then less frequent is a hemorrhagic stroke. That's a bleeding stroke, bleeding in the brain. You can't exactly stick your finger in the brain and put a Band-Aid on it if it's bleeding. You see bleeding strokes more commonly in vegans and vegetarians, but also in smokers and people who abuse alcohol. Now, the scary stats. It's always important to give these, to put these in, some sort of framework. Every 40 seconds, someone in the United States has a stroke. Every 40 seconds? So already during the course of this broadcast, a number of people have suffered with a stroke. Strokes tend to affect women more commonly than men. Strokes occur twice as often in African American men as in white men. Typically, almost 800,000 people a year in the United States suffer with a stroke. 50% of the factors that increase your risk of a stroke can be controlled by a healthier lifestyle. And 80% of recurrent strokes can be prevented with the right steps, such as controlling blood pressure, blood sugar, ask your doctor about taking a low-dose aspirin. All these things are important. Let's go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the steps you could take to prevent a stroke. Some of them you could do on your own, others you have to work with your doctor for.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
Okay, welcome back. This episode is the Many Strokes Are Preventable episode. So first, many of these things you have to work with your doctor minimally to get your blood tested. So you have to treat your diabetes. You want to maintain normal blood sugar. Diabetes is a big risk factor for a stroke. You want to have your cholesterol under control, which is eating, exercise, and sometimes medication. In fact, we have an episode on sterols for people with high cholesterol who can't take a statin drug. You want to keep your triglycerides under control. We have a podcast on that also. You want to treat your high blood pressure. High blood pressure is the number one cause of a stroke. Right after that is atrial fibrillation. That's the second most common cause. Atrial fibrillation, the top chambers of the heart that pump the blood to the bottom chambers of the heart, instead of beating normally like 80 times per minute, they're quivering. They might be beating 300 times a minute, but those beats are all over the place. There's missed beats, there's triple beats. It's crazy. And it's dangerous. It tends to throw off a blood clot. A couple of things not normally looked into, but should be. Uric acid. We did a podcast on uric acid. You want your uric acid to be below 6. And also look at a blood test called HSCRP. HSCRP, highly sensitive C-reactive protein, that's a proxy for inflammation in your blood vessel walls and in your heart. You want that to be low. And we have a podcast on HSCRP also. Now the easy stuff we can do easily at home. Diet counts. There's the Journal Neurological Review. It's Weill Cornell Medical College and Columbia University in New York. They looked at the Mediterranean diet. People who ate fish, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, whole grains. They drank tea. They had cocoa. They had salad greens. I would add like tree nuts to that, like walnuts and pecans and almonds. They reduced their risks of diabetes, cancer, stroke, and cardiovascular disease. By the way, I can email you a really pretty dynamic diet. It's a combination of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. They took the best of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. This was the Rush Institute over in Chicago. They study aging. They took the best components of the DASH diet, which was created to lower your blood pressure and help prevent heart disease, and the best parts of the Mediterranean diet, and combined it, and they gave it to thousands of people, and it really helped preserve their memory as they aged. It really lowered their risk of Alzheimer's. If you want a copy of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet combined as the MIND diet, which is good for your heart and good for your brain and good for your blood sugar and good for your belly, when you eat better, you tend to lose fat. Send me an email, Hickey, my name is Jerry Hickey, Hickey at invitehealth.com, and I'll send you a copy of that. Just say, please send me a copy of the Mind Diet. Now, more support for a healthy diet, but also quitting smoking and starting to exercise. This is in the journal Stroke. The journal Stroke is one of the major journals of the American Heart Association. It's from Harvard School of Public Health. It's data from the ongoing Nurses' Health Study. It's about 60,000 lady nurses. They were followed for 26 years. We would call this a very well-powered study. Plenty and plenty of people for many, many, many years. Very honest study. These are middle-aged women who quit smoking, who switched to a healthy diet, and who started to exercise, reduced their risk of the most common stroke, which is a blockage stroke and ischemic stroke, by a third. That's like 87% of all strokes, and cut their risk of all strokes by 25%. Now, more on prevention. 90% of stroke risk is due to modifiable risk factors. 90%. So prevention. Healthy eating. Once again, contact me for the Mind Diet. Exercise. 74% is directly due to your behavior. So reduce your salt intake. Years ago, about 10 years ago, I read a study from London. These people in London were using a huge amount of salt. They would put salt on French fries, on pizza, on bacon. I mean, they were using, we in New York, we in America use way too much salt to begin with. These people were using like twice as much. When they cut down on their salt, it was fascinating. The number of people with heart attacks and strokes dropped dramatically within the first year. It was dramatic. When you have too much, you need salt. But when you have too much salt, it constricts your blood vessels, it makes you retain fluid, and it makes your heart race, it makes your blood pressure go up. Now, alcohol. Excess alcohol, more than 2 drinks a day for a woman, more than 3 drinks a day for a man, leads to a bleeding stroke. By the way, a bit of red wine here and there is actually somewhat preventative of a stroke because it has some really good stuff in it like resveratrol, quercetin, and grapeseed extract. Reduce your stress, because stress can raise your blood pressure. Keep your cholesterol and triglycerides under control. We speak about that in separate podcasts. Control your blood pressure. I mean, if you need to take blood pressure medication, taking blood pressure medication is an awful lot safer than having high blood pressure. But many nutrients can help control your blood pressure. Control your blood sugar. Quit smoking, very important. Avoid soda. Avoid sugary drinks. These are connected to strokes and other health conditions. I would avoid processed meat. I would avoid barbecued, smoked, and grilled meats. Okay, let's go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to discuss drugs that are connected with having a stroke. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
Okay, welcome back. The podcast, most strokes are preventable. There are certain drugs that increase the risk of a stroke. Birth control pills and hormone replacement therapy. Not only are they connected to an increased risk of cancer in women, but they trigger blood clots. Women who use birth control pills or hormone replacement therapy have twice the risk of having a stroke than women who do not use them. NSAIDs like celecoxib, ibuprofen, naproxen, they can cause a stroke. In fact, they can cause a heart attack, they can cause heart failure, they can raise your blood pressure, they can mess with your kidney health, they can do a lot of things, so be careful with those drugs. When I was in pharmacy school back in the 70s, we learned that those drugs really were rescue medication, like when your back hurts so much you couldn't get off the couch. But we learned that you really shouldn't take them for more than 5 days in a row. I don't know where that changed to taking a drug like ibuprofen every day was a good idea. I have no idea when that changed, but it's not a good idea. Decongestants. The decongestants in your cough medicine, your cold medicine, your allergy medicine can cause a stroke. Names of these would be phenylpropanolamine, pseudoephedrine, ephedrine. Why? Well, they have a similar structure. Their chemical structure is similar to speed, amphetamine. Now, many strokes are preventable. 87% of strokes are caused by blood clots or a blockage. We went over some of the things that increase the risk, some of the things that lower the risk. But what do you look for? What are the symptoms? What are the warning signs that you're having a stroke? Many strokes are preventable. 87% of strokes are caused by blood clots or a blockage, like a piece of fat, like a piece of cholesterol. And we went over what increases the risk and what can lower your risk. But what are the symptoms? What are the warning signs that you're having a stroke? Think of the word fast. F is for face, your face droops. A is for arm, your arm gets weak. S is for speech, it's difficult to speak, you're slurring your speech. And T is for time, hey, it's time to act, call the ambulance. So think of the word fast. Now, additional warning signs that you're having a stroke: confusion, numbness in the body, sudden changes to your vision, like for a few seconds you can't see or your vision becomes very blurry all of a sudden. A mobility issue. It's hard to move something. Very sudden, thunderous headache. So it's different than a migraine that comes on over time. That could be thunderous, but it comes on over time. This is more like lightning. Now, some of the studies. Let's talk about some of the nutrients and foods that can really help lower your risk of having a stroke. First, minerals. These minerals are found in vegetables and fruits, like potassium. Now, according to NANES, which is a periodic survey of the American public, only 2% of Americans get sufficient potassium in their diet. If you lack potassium, you tend to be less alkaline. You tend to develop kidney stones. Your blood pressure tends to go up. You have a higher risk of a stroke and a heart attack. This is the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. They hand out the Nobel Prize for Medicine or the Nobel Prize in Physiology. They're well known, a great research hub up in Stockholm, Sweden. This is in the journal Stroke, one of the major journals of the American Heart Association. It's a meta-analysis of prospective studies, 10 studies. Now, I love prospective studies. They get a large group of people, could be 10,000, could be 30,000, could be 100,000. They document all different health issues with them, like, are they overweight? Do they exercise? What kind of food do they eat? Are they developing diabetes? How's their blood pressure? They give them periodic health checks. And then over the years, they separate people into different segments, like who developed diabetes and who in their age group didn't, or who developed breast cancer and who didn't. So when you do a prospective study, it keeps on giving you reams of information. So the Karolinska Institute analyzed 10 prospective studies, so this is going to be a huge amount of people. Increasing your potassium intake by 1,000 milligrams a day reduces the risk of ischemic stroke by 11%. So once again, you get potassium in fresh vegetables and fruits. I made a product called Alkalizer that gives you a lot of potassium. Potassium's so key to good health. Magnesium, lots of studies on this. Magnesium could be found in fish and fresh vegetables, especially green leafy vegetables like spinach, but also, lettuce and broccoli. You could get some in mushrooms. Low magnesium increases your risk of stroke by about 25%. This is a study of over 140,000 men and women between the age of 45 to 64. They were followed for 15 years. Over that time, there were 577 ischemic strokes, blockage strokes. It's called the Atherosclerosis Risk and Community Study. Magnesium, first of all, helps balance your blood pressure and your blood sugar. It's very important for both. The incidence was highest in people with hypertension or if they had diabetes. As magnesium intake increased, the risk of stroke decreased by up to 30%. That's pretty dynamic. Now, more on magnesium. This is JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association. These are men who smoke. Now, this does not give you a license to smoke, but it shows you how powerful magnesium is. In male smokers, they looked at the diets of 26,000 men who smoked between the age of 50 to 69 years of age. They followed them for over almost 14 years. With increasing levels of magnesium, it reduced their risk of stroke. High intake of magnesium, up to about 600 milligrams a day, really cut their risk of a stroke in smokers. Now, smoking is a major risk factor for a stroke, especially a bleeding stroke. And here's one more study on magnesium. They grouped together 7 prospective studies, more than 241,000 people. For every 100 milligram increase in intake of magnesium, the risk of stroke dropped by approximately 9%. So in other words, if you had 400 milligrams of magnesium every day, your risk of stroke would drop 36% just by achieving that. Now, according to NANES, that periodic survey of Americans, only 30% of Americans get sufficient magnesium in their diets. And this is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. If you want to take a magnesium supplement, here's a quick guide. Magnesium glycinate can supply a lot of magnesium in one tablet, like you could get 200 milligrams of magnesium, and by far it's the best absorbed magnesium you can ever purchase. A second option would be magnesium citrate. Magnesium citrate still has a great deal of magnesium. It's still well absorbed. It's the second best absorbed magnesium, but not quite as good as magnesium glycinate. The difference is magnesium citrate is also a stool softener. It'll work as a laxative. Magnesium glycinate is not a stool softener. Magnesium citrate is. So it's good to have the magnesium supplement every day. I take one daily. Now, folate, folic acid. Folate is found in plants. It's ubiquitous in plants. but it's hard to absorb. So oddly, a vegetarian eating plants all day long could still be low in folate. Plus, some people cannot convert folate to its active form, and unfortunately, a lot of multivitamins use the synthetic inactive form, which is folic acid. You want to use methyl tetrahydrofolate, that's already the active form. But folate reduced the risk of bleeding strokes, and it was independent of its effect on homocysteine. This is in the journal Stroke, once again, one of those major journals, the American Heart Association. Folate, first of all, is known to reduce the first two steps in the cancer process, initiation and promotion, and that's always a good thing. But it also lowers homocysteine, which is something connected to increasing the level of plaque deposition in the arteries inside your heart. But this was separate from it. The folate is doing something else. Now, we're going to go to a quick break because this seems to be a fairly lengthy episode. When we come back, I'm going to talk about cocoa and green tea for stroke prevention. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
Okay, welcome back to the episode, Many Strokes Are Preventable. We spoke about magnesium, a mineral, potassium, a mineral, and folate, a B vitamin, lowering the risk of stroke. I gave you examples of the research on them. Now let's talk about cocoa. Now, cocoa gets processed into chocolate. And when they process cocoa into chocolate, they Dutch it, they add milk fat, and they add sugar. Unfortunately, when you do that, a lot of the good ingredients for the heart and for the brain in the cocoa can be damaged. When you process the cocoa into chocolate, you can lose these valuable components, especially the flavanols. These are great for circulation, they're great for the heart, they're great for the brain. So even if your chocolate bar is dark chocolate and it's 70% cocoa, there's no guarantee that these ingredients are in there. So I always go with cocoa and get cocoa as a supplement. The cocoa sold in supermarkets can be tainted with sprays, chemical sprays, and with a heavy metal called cadmium. Cadmium is connected to breast cancer and damage to the liver and kidneys. When they have cocoa as a supplement, it has to be checked for these things. It doesn't have to be checked for sprays. We do that on our own. That's a separate thing. But it has to be checked for bacteria and heavy metals and things of that nature. We go steps beyond that. Like we're using a non-GMO cocoa. It comes from Ghana. It's fair trade. There's no child labor involved. You have to do the right thing when you pick things like cocoa and coffee and tea. You have to make sure it's coming from a reliable source and it's an ethical source. So our cocoa is non-GMO. It's never been sprayed. It's never been irradiated. Let's talk about cocoa. This is a report from the American Academy of Neurology. It's McMaster University. That's up in Ontario, Canada. They're looking at approximately 44,000 people. One serving of cocoa a week reduced the risk of a stroke by 22%. The cocoa flavanols. And in a second study, if you have cocoa flavanols frequently, it reduces your risk of dying from a stroke by about 46%. So now let's go across the pond, across the Atlantic to the Karolinska Institute. Cocoa, once again, reduced the risk of a stroke. This was about 37,000 men aged 49 to 75, followed for 10 years. In a review of 5 studies, cocoa reduced the risk of having a stroke by about 20%. And the more, the better. So cocoa, once again, reduces the risk of a stroke. Here's a third study on, well, these are, some of these are reviews of studies, so it's more than a third study here. So here's a study from the EPIC Norfolk study. Norfolk is in England. It's in BMJ, British Medical Journal. It's almost 21,000 adults looking at cocoa flavanols. They definitely decreased the risk of stroke. It was a 12-year-long study. It reduced your risk of dying from cardiovascular disease by 25%, and it lowered your risk of having a stroke by 23%. In a systematic review of 158,000 people from 9 studies, cocoa reduced your risk of dying from a stroke or a heart attack by 25%. Now, let's discuss green tea. This is from UCLA. 3 cups of green tea a day reduced your risk of a stroke by 21%. A meta-analysis of 9 human clinical trials, 195,000 people. 6 cups a day reduced your risk of a stroke by an additional 21%. So that means if you had 6 cups of green tea a day, you cut your risk of a stroke by 42%. And the effect was consistent and appreciable. This is the journal Stroke. Here's another study in the journal Stroke. This is from Japan. It's the Japanese Cerebral and Cardiovascular Center. It's over 83,000 Japanese adults followed for 13 years. A cup of coffee did reduce your risk of a stroke, but green tea reduced your risk of a stroke by 20%. But here was the thing. If you had 1 cup of coffee and 2 cups of green tea over the course of the day, it cut your risk of stroke by 32%. These are bleeding strokes, intracerebral hemorrhage. Now here's the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. It just came out. Drink green tea and live longer. Now, once again, if you have green tea, if you add milk to it, there's some evidence this binds up the ingredients that are healthy. I would add lemon to it. Lemon protects the ingredients from your digestive enzymes. You absorb it better. You absorb more of the ingredients from green tea when you add a little lemon to it. Drinking green tea 3 times a week led to a longer, healthier life. Over a year's worth of additional healthy living. It's in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. In a study of over 100,000 people followed for 7 years, having green tea 3 times a week or more definitely increased life expectancy, a 20% lower risk of heart disease, a 20% lower risk of having a stroke, a 22% lower risk of dying from a stroke or heart attack, and a 15% lower risk of all-cause mortality, which is dying from anything. Now, 8 years later, they went back and they looked at 14,000 of these original people, and they followed them for an additional 5 years. And the results were pretty stupefying. At this point, they were basically following some of these people for over 20 years. And they found people who kept up their green tea consumption. They kept up having green tea frequently over the week, a whopping 39% lower risk of heart disease and a whopping 39% lower risk of having a stroke and a 29% lower risk of all-cause mortality. Black tea gave very little protection. It's really the green tea. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com. Please subscribe and leave us a review. You could follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Invite Health. Hope to see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health podcast. Thank you so much for listening.